Here I was, staring into the charcoal depths of his eyes, while the cool night air of Neo-Omu brushed against my skin like a soft silk ribbon. In this moment, standing on the high balcony of the Royal Observatory, I felt something I had spent years trying to ignore. I had kept myself in a fortress of denial, telling myself that this heart was meant for equations and engineering, not for the man standing before me. I was never a fan of this agreement. When my father first revealed the ancient blood oath, I felt like a bird sold in a cage. I only agreed for my family's sake, to save my father from a debt of honor he couldn't pay. I spent so many nights crying into my pillow, mourning the fact that I was just property to be handed over to a stranger because of a 120-year-old promise. I had convinced myself that I would marry him, do my duty, and remain a cold, distant ghost in his palace. But now, standing here in the presence of the heir I was promised to, the air between us feels electric. My deep ebony skin hummed where it neared his, and I realized I had hidden the truth even from myself. I didn't think I would feel this for him. I didn't think a dusty promise could bring me to the love of my life. I looked at his bronze ebony skin glowing under the twin moons, and I realized I couldn't bring myself to say it. Not yet, because it turned out the prince had something of his own to say. To understand how a scholar with a master's degree and a hatred for tradition ended up in a vibranium weave wedding dress, you have to look past the glass towers of the palace. You have to go down into the solar thatch outskirts where I grew up. My name is Maya, and in a village that looked like a dream of the future, my life felt like a relic of the past. A century ago, my family were legends. My ancestor, Jaide, was a master hunter who saved the founding king's life during a celestial meteor storm. In his gratitude, the king showered Jaide with enough gold and land to last 10 lifetimes. But wealth is a slippery thing in the hands of those who don't respect the sweat it takes to earn it. Generations of my family had managed that fortune with the grace of a falling stone. Bad land deals, failed investments in outdated energy grids, and a taste for luxury they hadn't earned eventually bled us dry. By the time I was born, we were nobodies, living in a humble solar thatch hut, our only inheritance being my father's pride and my own restless brain. I pushed myself. I studied until the bioluminescent light in the village library flickered out every night. I earned my master's in sustainable engineering, thinking that logic and technology were the only things that mattered. I thought I could engineer my way out of the shadows. But on my 18th birthday, the world I thought I knew came crashing down. The night was still, the twin moons hanging heavy and silver in the sky. My father called me into the back room, his face etched with a weight I hadn't understood. His hands trembled as he pulled a leaden box from beneath the floorboards. Inside was a scroll made of flexible, translucent bioglass, an ancient material that shimmered with a rhythmic amber light. Maya, he said, his voice barely a whisper, there's a debt you were born to pay. 120 years ago, King Aloe and our ancestor Jaide made a pact in the presence of the gods. The king promised that his 1000th heir would marry into our family, choosing the firstborn daughter. He wanted to ensure our bloodlines remained one, a bond for the life that was saved. I laughed, but it was a dry, bitter sound. I told him we lived in the age of hover tech and holographic star charts, that people didn't trade daughters anymore. But my father pointed to the biometric thumbprint glowing at the bottom of the glass. He told me that if the 1000th daughter refused, the gods would see it as a broken oath. The solar touch would fail, the waters would turn bitter, and the village would fall into darkness. And then he told me the part that made my blood turn to ice. Prince Zale and I were born on the same minute, on the same night of the two moons, 20 years ago. I wasn't just a daughter, I was the target of a 120-year-old countdown. I was filled with a cold, paralyzing confusion. I was a scientist, a woman of logic, But when I saw the sky turn a bruised, unnatural purple the next day, I knew the curse was no myth. I agreed to the pact to save my father, but I demanded a condition. I would not meet the prince until the 40th market day before my 21st birthday. I wanted those years to remain mine, even if they were lived in the shadow of a cage. What I didn't know was that Prince Zale had been watching me. He was a man who hated the doors of the court as much as I hated the laws of the scroll. He didn't want to marry a name on a bioglass document. He wanted to know the soul behind the degree. For months, he traded his royal hover car for a simple village cycle. He sat in the back of my community lectures, hidden by a commoner's cloak. He watched me teach the village children how to bridge ancient irrigation with modern tech. He didn't see a peasant, he saw a partner. I remember one evening, while I was fixing a broken holographic fountain in the square, a man in a dark cloak stepped from the shadows and handed me a specialized wrench I had been reaching for. I told him without even looking up that efficiency was always better than heritage. He laughed softly, a sound that was so warm and genuine it stayed with me for weeks, humming in the back of my mind while I tried to hate the prince I had never met. It wasn't until our official meeting in the Royal Observatory that he pulled back his hood. When I realized the man from the fountain was the heir to the throne, I felt a surge of anger. I accused him of spying, of playing with me, but Zale only looked at me with those charcoal eyes and said he was ensuring that the 1000th daughter was someone who could lead Neo-Omu beside him, not just follow a step behind. The wedding was a whirlwind of holographic lights and ancestral drums. We fulfilled the pact. The purple sky vanished, replaced by a brilliant blue. But as we stood on the balcony after the ceremony, the silence between us was different. I was staring into his eyes, my sculptural Bantu knots catching the silver moonlight, and I finally came out of my denial. I loved him. I had loved him since the fountain, and I had loved him through the scroll. Zale looked at me, his sharp jawline softening. "You know," he said, a small smirk playing on his lips, "the first day I saw you in that lecture hall, I wasn't sure if I liked you or not. You were so stubborn, so focused on your engineering tablet, that you looked like you wanted to redesign the whole world just to prove you could." I teased him then, a small laugh escaping my lips. "And what about now, Your Highness? Have I redesigned you yet?" Zale took my hand, his thumb stroking my deep ebony skin. The smirk vanished, replaced by a raw, royal honesty I hadn't expected. He leaned in, his voice soft and rhythmic, catching the ozone scent of the village below. "But ever since that day I laid eyes on you by the fountain, it was already a fact. I don't care about the 120-year promise anymore. I don't care about the scroll. I love you, Maya. Always have and always will." Tears of joy blurred my vision, but I was smiling larger than I had in my life. I held his hands tight, our heights nearly matching as I looked into his charcoal eyes. "I have always loved you too, Zale. I was just too afraid to believe that destiny could actually be this kind." We both laughed then, the sound echoing over the bioluminescent paths of Neo-Omu. The ancestors had written the map, but we had chosen the destination. The pact was satisfied, but our story, our real story, was only just beginning.